And this year, the cool thing about it is our revenues are 5 times higher in 2021 already than they were in 2020.
Wow.
So, we went from a 7-figure company like 3 years ago when we first started to 8 figures, a year and a half ago. And now we're just moving on towards 9 figures.
Welcome to Breaking Barriers. You know your path. We know the obstacles, and we can teach you how to tear them down. And now your host, CEO and founder of Adapting Social, John Vigero.
Jeremy Miner, thank you so much for joining us on Breaking Barriers. We're honored. Guys, everybody listening in, I'm super excited about this. Everybody that knows me in my Adapting Social hat knows that I am a huge advocate, and I'm a thoroughbred salesperson. So when I saw your details come through, my podcast director, I was like, I need to talk to this guy, especially what you got going on with neuro. So I thought that was very, very interesting. For people out there who don't know who Jeremy Miner is, please share them, a short summary.
Yeah, I'm like the boring nerd guy. So I'm the founder and chairman of an organization called Seventh Level. We're a sales training organization headquartered out of Sydney, Australia. We train companies all the way from, Fortune 500 companies to SMB, all the way to individual salespeople that really sell anything. That's all we do. A bunch of boring stuff. What would you like to know?
Boring stuff that makes impact, all right?
Yeah, a lot of people would say that for sure.
Yeah. So listen, I'm very intrigued. I saw that when doing research that the first year of business, the company made $37 million. Those are some huge numbers.
Sure.
What would you say for startups that are like, that's like a dream for me? Like, what are some achievable goals that can make that happen?
Well, it's funny for me because they made that much money in the first 3 years. To me, that's like not that awesome. Like in my sales career, like I had a 16-year sales career. I made close to $33 million in commissions as a W-2 or 1099 salesperson in 4 different industries, just as an employee, right? So then when I started Seventh Level, I'm like, oh my gosh, business owner now, because I always looked when I sold for these companies, like, well, if I'm making this, if I make, $2.5 million a year in commission selling for these guys, they must be like gazillionaires, but I didn't understand like the cost and the advertising cost to get leads and the office spaces and the employees and all the costs that went into it until you start your own business. As you know, right? When you start your own business, you're like, oh my gosh, like we just made all this money. And then 70% of it is just gone, you're like, what's going on? So I think, the biggest thing for us, like the first year, I think we did decent. We made like 7 figures the first year. The next year we bumped up. We got pretty big. We made close to 8 figures. And then this last year, the last 12 months, we've really, really scaled. And I really think that the biggest thing for us has just been about building the right team. Like the first year, it was pretty much me and my assistant and like a sales guy. And that was it the first year. And I was like trying to, hire this agency and do this and that. And I was like throwing money. I was like throwing money like, on the fire, like hoping and praying that something would work out.
Right.
Realizing you can't run a business that way. And I would say about 20 months ago, I brought in a CEO. He's now my business partner, Matt Ryder. And our CEO just started running the business side of things and like building a team and building a culture around my methodology and training. And we just started going crazy, just started scaling. So you have to have the right team as a business owner, because I don't care if you're like Tony Robbins and you've got the best thing since sliced bread. If he doesn't have the right team around him, it just doesn't go anywhere that it could go. So having the right team, putting money into that team and that culture for us, and I think most business owners, really helps them scale. And without it, you just don't go anywhere.
Yeah, Jeremy, that's a big golden nugget you just dropped. Anybody listening in right now, I think it's so important to identify that when you're starting off early, no matter how soon it is, how late it is in the game, there will be nothing more of an asset than the people around you. And I've realized that too, Jeremy, as I've scaled Adapting Social. In the beginning, it was like throwing your mud through the tires and you're like, what the hell's going on here? But then all of a sudden you put the right people in place and things just start fucking working out really well.
You get the right people in place that have different skill levels than you, right? Like my skill level is obviously training salespeople, recruiting salespeople, that type of stuff. That's my wheelhouse. That's what I grew up in. But right. I didn't have the skill set like my CEO does to like run the business and the numbers and the compensation plans for our salespeople. Like I just didn't understand that because I'd never done it, right?
Yep.
And so without having that, like our COO is amazing and like just everything operational wise. Now we have an awesome CFO. So like it's just without having that team, it just doesn't go anywhere.
That's the truth, man. To do something by yourself, you can only go so far. With the team, you make big moves. Now, so some of the questions that we often get, and we got for you specifically, was do you have some sort of morning and evening ritual that you do on a regular basis to get yourself motivated or to get your day set up for success?
Man, I'm gonna say something different than what you hear most of your guests say. My morning ritual is not like meditation or writing in a journal or listening to Tony Robbins. I think all that's great. But as salespeople, and I think all that helps you. But as a salesperson, like all your personal development skills you learn, like watching Tony Robbins or whoever you like, or reading all these books in personal development, that's good on your mindset. But here's what I'm going to suggest. Like when that prospect answers the phone, if you're in sales or if you're a business owner and that prospect answers the phone and you don't know the right questions to ask at the right time early in that conversation to disarm that prospect, to get them to want to engage with you, to want to be open up to you, all that personal development like just flies out the window, right? When you get rejected day after day after day, if you don't understand how to use skill sets that work with human behavior rather than against it to get the prospect to want to open up to you. So my daily routine is like, I get up, I get ready, I come into my office. I do read about 45 minutes every morning. Like I literally read 3 books a month since I was probably about 21. I remember going to like a Brian Tracy event when I was 21 in college. I had first got into sales.
Love Brian.
Yeah, Brian's a good guy. My first training product I did when I first launched, we did like a basic product together. It was called the Ultimate Closing Academy or something, just a 2-hour product. Brian's a great guy. But I remember he said like, look, you got to read like every day, something every day. So I just like religiously like took that advice. And since I was 21, 3 books a day or 3 books a month, every single month, 12 months a year, you're talking about 36 books a year for the last really 20 years. And then when I drive in my car, like Brian talks about university on wheels, like I don't listen to like the latest pop or, CNN news to, current negative news. Like I don't want to listen to all that stuff. Like I want to listen to something that's going to help me and help my clients move forward. So reading, I come into my office 45 minutes. I get up usually about 5:15. Get ready, come into my office. I'm usually about 6:15, read for 45 minutes, check emails. And then, typically here we are at 7:30 in the morning, my time or whatever here in Missouri or wherever we're at. And that's kind of my routine. I read something in business, in sales, in persuasion, because, well, that's what we do. We're a training company. So I say just, the biggest thing you can do as far as like a routine is just really gaining knowledge, because your biggest expense in life, this is what we always tell people at events. We just did a virtual event last week. Your biggest expense in life is your lack of knowledge. That's your biggest expense in life, right? It's like if you're in sales or you're a business owner or an entrepreneur, your biggest expense is not understanding the right sales skills that I would say work with human behavior to get you where you want to go. And that's what you keep paying life every single year, because you still haven't developed and learned those skills. So knowledge is your biggest expense in life if you don't have that. And it's so easy to get,
I love how visceral that was for you to say that. And that was such a fire quote. Your biggest expense in life is your lack of knowledge. And
it's true.
And that's not just sales, man. That's fucking in every other area.
Everything.
What do you think?
It's so true. It's like if you want to learn how to invest your money. So like I'm reading books, and like I have a great financial advisor, one of probably the top 5 in his company in the United States, and it's a huge company. But still, I'm like, man, I need to know what's going on, because this guy could just be like pulling the wool over my eyes. I would have no idea. It's not like you get educated your senior year in like, financial investing, advanced financial investing in the stock market. They don't teach you that stuff. So like I'm reading books and listening to stuff because I want to learn what the terminology is and what it actually means. And that's your biggest expense in life. Like you can't get anywhere in life without knowledge in what you want to be great at. Like just like Michael Jordan, right? He talks about, I read his biography the other day. He's like, listen, you can take 1,000 jump shots a day,
Right.
but you're still not going to be good at basketball if you have the wrong technique when you shoot, right? So you have to learn the right skill sets, the right techniques. It's not just learning, but it's learning from the right people that's going to set you apart.
That's fire. And I love MJ. I love that reference. If you can, so another question that popped up for us is, talk to us about how you created the neuroemotional persuasion questioning. So I'm going to call you JM. Is that a JM original?
It's a JM original. So I think, so I'll kind of take you back, like just real quick for like a 2-minute story of how this all happened. So when I got into sales, I was a 21-year-old broke college kid. Okay. So you remember going to college, like, dude, I was like broke, and I had just got married, had a kid on the way. I was like 21, okay, to my first wife. And I got hired by this company selling alarm systems, going door to door. It's straight commission. There's like no salary or anything. Like if you don't sell, you can make more at McDonald's serving burgers than if you don't sell very well. Okay. So there's a little bit of risk, but there's upside. And so, the company takes you out in a van, they drop you off in a neighborhood and basically slaps you on the back. Hope you studied your script, gave you a few books from the old sales gurus to read. And then like, hey, go make some sales. We'll pick you up after dark. I mean, that's really what the training was. So I got out there and they're like, you got to be really excited when you knock on the door and tell them how great it is and how it's going to help them and blah, 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 blah. And I started knocking on the doors and I noticed my prospects were saying, and I would talk about the benefits of the product and the features and blah, 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 blah. And I started getting all these objections, like at every door, like we can't afford it. Your price is too high. We want to look around. We don't need it. I need to talk to my spouse. Let me think it over. Can you call me back a week, a month, a year later? And I would say probably after about 7 or 8 weeks of all that rejection, I got to a point where I was like, man, like maybe selling just wasn't for me because I barely made any money. You're talking like maybe one sale a week. It's getting paid like $200. It just was nothing, right? So I got to a point where I was like, man, I'm going to have to tell my wife at the time that we're going to have to move in with your parents because we don't have enough money to pay the rent. Okay. And I remember one night my sales manager picked me up and he popped in this Tony Robbins CD. This was like 2001. Like this was forever ago, man. So he popped in this Tony Robbins CD and it changed my life. And Tony said something like this. He said, we were talking about skill level and technique a minute ago. He said, most people fail for the simple reason they don't learn the right skills necessary to succeed. They don't learn the right skills. And he actually goes on to say, everybody's taught skills, but the people who don't succeed are the ones who are not taught the right ones. So I'm like, well, what's going on with that? So it's like a light bulb, I would say, went off on my head, or like the heavens opened. And I said, maybe what the company was training me and what I was learning from, like what I said, I call them the old sales gurus now. Maybe they just weren't the right skills. Maybe they were just outdated and didn't work, because I'd never really thought that could even be, something that could happen. So imagine at this time. So I'm learning these traditional selling skills from the gurus. Okay. And some of them would work and I'd make a few sales here and there. But I also noticed a lot of what they were teaching didn't work at all. And when I used it, I would actually trigger more resistance and trigger more objections, which led to less sales. Now, at the same time, my major in college was behavioral science and human psychology. This is kind of where this came from. So my professors were teaching me like these theories of how the brain works and how people are persuaded to do something or not persuaded something. And that was like over here. But the gurus were all teaching these techniques that were like completely at opposite, and it ends with that. Like it didn't make any sense. Like they weren't both matched. They were like completely polar opposite ways of thinking. So what I did is I took human behavior elements of what my professors were teaching me and what I was reading in all these advanced books on human psychology. And what I did is I brought that into the sales process, and I started learning really how to get prospects to pull me in where I didn't have to push, and selling became like very, very easy and very, very profitable. That's kind of how it started. And I, this might make sense if your listeners are out there to write this down, because, in behavioral science, we learned that there really are three forms of communication. Okay. And I think like when you understand like where you are now with your sales ability compared to where you could be, because you just don't know what you don't know, right? But it completely changes everything. So the first mode of communication. It's considered like boiler room selling. You know what I'm talking about? Like when you watch like Wolf on Wall Street movies and like, hey, I've got a great opportunity for you, right? You know? Yeah, like, hey, you should do it. You know, you're stupid if you don't. Like, you talk about the features and benefits, and then you try to push them and tell them why they need to buy and why they need to go with you. It's actually the least form of persuasion. We're the least, the least persuasive when we tell people things, or we attempt to dominate them or posture them or manipulate them or push them into doing something we want them to do. So it's like, are you married now?
Yes.
Okay, I saw online that you were engaged a while ago. I didn't know if, hey, did it work out or whatever? You know, I never want to assume, but it's like if you tell your spouse, like, hey, you really need to do something, and then you push her to do something, what do they typically do back?
Push back.
Yeah, they just push back. It's human behavior 101. But yet salespeople do the same thing, right? So when we present, you know, we're taught that, you know, you have to have a great presentation. You show them all the services and products, and we've got the best this and the best that, which, by the way, doesn't every salesperson say they have the best product or service, right?
Like software.
How many salespeople that sell you something say, you know, John, you know, our service is the 5th best in the market. No one does, right? Everybody says that they're the best. Yeah. So as a prospect, when you hear that, it actually causes you to trust them less, because every salesperson says the same thing, or especially if they talk down their competitors. They're used to every salesperson doing the same thing. So according to the data, it's not very persuasive if your presentation is more than 10% of your entire sales process. Now, most sales presentations for most salespeople, like long pitch decks, 50-minute pages, like it's an hour long. It's half their sales process. Not very persuasive. Telling your story, you know, that's a low form of persuasion. And, you know, unless you're up on stage, nobody cares about your story. If you're selling one-to-one, whose story do they care about? They care about their story, right? Yeah. Giving a sales pitch. You know, we've all been taught that you have to give a great pitch, but according to the science, not very persuasive. Look at Shark Tank. You know, the entrepreneurs, they come on stage, and Damon John and Mark Cuban and Barbara, and they're all sitting there and they start pitching. And you see the body, like they're, you know, the sharks are just like, oh my gosh, like it's so bad. All right. And the big one is assuming the sale. You know, we're all taught you have to assume the sale. According to the data, very low on the persuasion poll, especially if you're in a more complex selling environment that requires multiple calls and touches, okay? That's the first form of persuasion. We call that ERA, like ERA 1 type of selling. Now, ERA 2 type of selling is known as consultative selling. You've heard that, right?
Yep.
Consultative selling. All right. So we're more persuasive when we attempt to have like a discussion, okay? That's consultative selling. Came out in the 1980s with a book called Spin Selling. It was by a professor, Neil Rackham, who taught that you needed to ask logical-based questions to find out the needs of the client. Like there was a revelation back in those days with boiler room selling going on. Like, you got to ask questions. What's going on? But what's a downfall just of asking logical-based questions? We call those surface-level questions. When you ask your prospect logical-based questions like, what's keeping you awake at night? Or, you know, what solution are you looking for? What type of budget do you have for this? Or what's 2 problems you have, which are just surface-level questions, your prospects give you surface-level answers back.
Right.
And do human beings buy on emotion or logic? Emotion.
Emotion all day.
Emotion all day. Brain studies prove that, okay? So once again, it's more persuasive than like, you know, manipulating them, assuming the sale, pushing them in to do it, but you're still bringing out very little emotion because you're just asking logical-based questions. It just doesn't bring out much emotion unless they're just like a lay-down sale. Third mode of communication, we call that dialogue. We call that ERA 3 type of selling, is we're the most persuasive when we allow others to persuade themselves. That's called dialogue. So that's what I was learning from my professors, but it was mainly theory. There was no like step-by-step structure of like a system of questions and like how to take them through a process. So I created what's called, as you know, neuro-emotional persuasion questioning. That stands for NEPQ. And the key is where we use certain questions and techniques that work with human behavior to get the prospect to pull you in rather than you trying to push them forward. You see the difference in that?
Very big difference.
Bunch of nerdy stuff.
No, man. And listen, I think anybody that owns a business, I think the one thing that most people, I have people on my team, I meet people all the time. There was only one time that I've ever been in a situation with a salesperson that they gave me like we're middle tier products in the market. And I was like, whoa, wait a second. But you know what? I think the biggest thing though is that everybody, whether you're in business or not, is in sales. Whether you're selling yourself to date somebody, whether you're selling yourself, to get a job, whatever it is, there's sales involved in it. And what you're saying makes logical sense in and out of business. It doesn't have to be like business.
Yeah, John. I mean, it's so true. Like I go to events sometimes and somebody will come up to me like, man, I really like what you said, but I'm just not in sales. I'm like, I'm like, look, dude, let's just be real. Everyone is in sales now. It does not matter what you do. Even like you said, even if you don't get paid a commission, okay, you're still out there. Everybody listening to this, I don't care if you're a stay-at-home mom that has 12 kids, you are trying to persuade, influence, and convince and move others on a daily basis. We call that non-sales selling if you're not being paid to do that, right? So like you said, if you're like a business owner or an entrepreneur and you're trying to get employees to follow the vision of where you want to go with your company, well, what the hell are you doing? You're trying to persuade, influence, and move others. Like you said, if you're dating, same thing. You're trying to move others. If you're an employee trying to get your boss to give you a pay raise, you're trying to persuade, influence, and move others. I mean, if you're an attorney trying to get the judge to prove your client is innocent, well, you're trying to persuade, you're trying to influence. I mean, hell, we have all these politicians fighting all the time. If you're in politics, you're trying to get people to vote for you. You are trying to convince, persuade, and move others. So it doesn't matter what you do or anything in life. If you're a teacher trying to convince your kids to do their homework, same thing. Everybody's in sales. It does not matter what you do, period.
I'm gonna throw this out there. 7th level dating coaching.
I've had so many people ask me that. They're like, you need to write a book on dating and stuff and blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's how I got my wife. My wife is a model from Eastern Europe. And like, everybody's like, how did you end up with her? She's like 10 grades above you. It's like, well, you ask the right questions at the right time, get them to pull you in. They're like, you need to write a book. I'm like, I don't think my wife would want me to do that.
Jeremy, I love that, man. So we have a couple minutes left. I have a couple questions I want to ask you. So now, where do you see yourself in the business going in the next 5 years?
Well, we're investing. The cool thing about us is in 2020, we found out a couple months ago, we just won Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies in the United States. We qualified for that. That was cool. We didn't even know anything about it. And someone's like, hey, you should qualify for that. I think you qualify. I'm like, okay. And we fill out the app and we're like, yeah, there's no way, we're too small of a company. But you have 7 million companies apply for that award every year. They only pick the top 5,000. We ended up being 1,232 on that list. So we had like 450% growth from 2019 to 2020. We had started in 2018. And then this year, the cool thing about it is our revenues are 5 times higher in 2021 already than they were in 2020. Wow. So, we went from a 7-figure company like 3 years ago when we first started to 8 figures, a year and a half ago. And now we're just moving on towards 9 figures. So we're getting into, we train a lot of, individual salespeople and all that stuff. But we're also getting into the last couple of years, a lot more companies. One of our larger clients that we do a lot of work with in a couple of years ago when we first started is Google AdWords. We train like 4 of their larger divisions. Train a lot of car dealerships, insurance agencies, financial agencies. I mean, it's real estate, it's like all over the board. B2B cybersecurity, we're training a lot of companies in that. We even got a new client from Germany I saw a couple months ago who sells seatbelts. Wow. So it doesn't really, big one over there in Germany. So it doesn't really matter, what product or service is, because of our step-by-step structure that we train organizations in. It doesn't matter what industry or space, the duplication is there with their salespeople. So our plan is just to, steady growth. My CEO is always like, dude, we're not going to be able to do 500% growth every single year for the next 10 years. You do realize that? And I'm like, well, why not? I'm all for it. Like, what are you talking about? He's more of the realistic guy.
I love it, man. And so what would you say, is there some sort of adage, quote, or thing that you have picked up over the years, even if it's a JM original, that you really resonate with?
Well, there's a lot of quotes that I really resonate with. And I don't know if this is my quote or not. Probably somebody has said this because it's so generic, but I really believe that success is really just a choice. Okay. I'm sure somebody said it out there before me, surely. But I look at people and they're like, I don't know why I'm not successful. And I'm like, like success is just a choice, right? Your biggest expense in life, like we talked about, is your lack of knowledge, right? It just is. And that's in anything you do. So if you are, a financial investor, it's your lack of knowledge of how to get the right leads. It's your lack of knowledge of how to communicate what you're offering. It's your lack of knowledge around how to build your business, right? Those things can change. I mean, we live in the information age.
Right.
We literally live in the information age. Like, if my wife's like, hey, can you go change the oil? And I say, well, I don't know how to. I'm just like, well, why can't I just go to YouTube and like learn how to do it? Right. It's like we live in the information age. So you want to hire the right people to train you and mentor who've actually done what you want to do. Like if you want to be the best at sales, you hire the people who are the best at training salespeople that get the biggest results or had big results when they sold. You don't hire somebody that just had one good year. Like same thing with digital marketing, with everything that you do and all that. You hire the right people to teach you those skills that have already done what you want. You don't hire a novice. I see so many amateurs out there, especially in sales or marketing. We see a lot of coaches that like start a marketing agency and they had like 1 or 2 good years of marketing their own products and services. And now they're an expert marketing agency that's going to train hundreds of different industries. No, they don't have the skill set yet. They might be able to market what they did, but how are they going to market like 50 other industries who they have no idea what to do with, right? Like you have to have experience and really that you just have to have experience and knowledge to be able to duplicate that into multiple different industries, especially with what you do, what we do. And I see so many people falling for just the amateur who had one good year and then somehow wonder why it's not going to work out for them.
Right. And that's so damn true. Now, this is where we get deep. You ready for this?
Yeah, well, whatever, man.
So one of the questions that we ask all of our guests, we like to put them on the spot a little bit, right? Because it's about legacy in most cases, especially for entrepreneurs, what you're leaving behind for your kids, your family, the people that, you have impacted throughout your life.
Yeah.
What would JM's gravestone say? It says loving father, boring guy as a nerd.
The boring guy. Yeah.
What would yours say?
Well, I hope people, however long I have left on this planet, because this life goes by very fast before we move on to the next life, right. which is exciting and scary at the same moment, because none of us know 100% of what happens in the next life, right? We all have glimpses or maybe think we know, but none of us really know. I would say the biggest thing for me is for me to be able to leave behind my skill sets that I feel like God has left for me, but he gave me some skill sets. But it's just like in the New Testament where you talk about the parables of the parable of the talents, where he gives all of us talents, but most people, because of our fear, we bury those talents in the sand. Right. So I hope that number one, I've never done that, and I never want to do that. But I hope that I'm able to take those talents that he's given me, which I've done so far, and really expand on that and keep gaining knowledge that he's abundantly given all of us in the information age, to be able to scale that where millions of people can learn those skills, not just thousands or tens of thousands, but millions of people learn those skills. So they bless their lives. They bless the companies they work for lives. They bless their families' lives, because it's all has an impact. Like if you're in sales or an entrepreneur and you don't learn the right communication skills, it's like the butterfly effect. If you've ever seen that show, it affects not only affects your spouse, your kids, but then it affects their kids. It affects their kids. It's like this whole thing, like you affect generations to come if you're not willing to learn the right skills in anything you do financially. Like I said, money doesn't buy you happiness. It just gives you more options. It gives you more options to help people, to do more things, but it does affect your family's future for generations to come. So what I hope with Seventh Level, that's why we don't have our company's not really a guru business. It's all about the methodology. It's not about me. It's not about our CEO, because our company, when Matt and I, I'm in my early 40s, he's in his late 30s. When we're not here, and let's say 50 years from now, that company is still going to be growing. It's still going to be an organization, a sales training organization. If you're just a guru business, you leave, you're gone. I mean, there's nothing left there because you are the business. So our business is about, being here 75 years from now, 100 years from now, 150, 250 years from now, still teaching those skills to help people really grow and be able to sell the right way, work with human behavior, get your prospects to help them find problems they didn't even think they had and help them solve those problems, which blesses their lives because now they purchase your product and service, they get their problem solved, and they get what they want in their life. So it's a win-win for everybody. That's really in a nutshell what I if we could fit all that on a gravestone, like maybe you could click on the gravestone and then like a bio drops down, like hologram on the side. Maybe that will be there in 40 years.
I like it. Who knows, right? Who knows?
I mean, look where we've come in the last 20 years. Like, where do you think we're going to be in 40 years? Like, it'll be crazy.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, listen, Jeremy, I really do appreciate your time here. It's one asset we don't get back, man. I really, really do appreciate it. Where can people find you and engage with you online, social, website?
Yeah, the best place to go if you want to learn about what we do and our training and all that kind of stuff is you can join our Facebook group. It's called Sales Revolution. I think, do you have the link to Sales Revolution?
Yep.
Okay.
I'll definitely put it in there.
Yeah, just have them join Sales Revolution. Right when you join, that group has about 10,000 people in it. We started about 6 months ago, and they're all entrepreneurs, they're sales professionals. They just want to learn how to sell more. We go live in that group about 3 to 5 times a week with different Q&As, different trainings. In fact, I'm doing a big training today on how to get to the right decision makers in any organization if you sell B2B. That's a 35-minute free training I'm going to do in there later today. Okay, so we do that. So we go live Q&As. We interview clients and how we wrote out their sales structures, and they share what they're doing. So a lot of values there for people. People make more sales just from the damn free Facebook group before they get into our training as a client. It's crazy. So right when you join that group, we just tag, somebody on my team tags you. So check your Facebook, your Messenger and Facebook, and then we send over like a free 45-minute training on objection prevention. Certain questions to ask in your sales conversations that prevent objections from even happening in their mind. It's crazy. And you get that for free. And just give us a shout out when you join the Facebook group.
I love it, man. Again, Jeremy, thank you so much for your time, brother. Again, congrats on your success with what you're doing. And we look forward to having you back, man.
Yeah, I think that, if you have me back, I think we got the invite, like after I set it up to go virtual, that we could come to your studio or something and shoot it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be in New York next week. Our PR director, she's like, you should just fly to New York. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's like in 5 days. Like I've got so much going on. Can I do it virtual? I was like, hey, next time tell them I'll go there. Where, the last speaking event I did was actually in the Freedom Tower in New York City, like December 17th. So that was like 2.5 months before COVID. That was the last place I was at. And I've never been in a building like, I've been to Chicago a lot because it's closer to Missouri. And I'm like, wow, Chicago's so big. And I get up there, I'm on the top floor and they have those windows that look all the way around the whole city. And I'm like looking around, I'm like, there's a Chicago there. There's a Chicago there. There's a Chicago there. There's a Chicago over there. I mean, it's like 12 Chicagos. It's crazy, all the buildings. It's insane.
That's why being in the city, and going around the city and then going to different cities, it just makes you realize how big, because when you go to like Charlotte, North Carolina, or Philly, or if you go to like Chicago, it looks like a almost like a suburb of a city. It's like a little borough.
I know, it's crazy. Like I said, we live in Scottsdale over half the year, and it's really spread out. Phoenix is a big city. It's the 4th largest, but it's really spread out. There's not like the big, huge buildings like New York. But we live in Missouri a lot here in the summer and early fall. And we go to Chicago a lot because, there's nothing to do here in Missouri. And Chicago's like, oh my gosh, it's like Gotham City. It's like so big. But then you go to New York City and you're just like, it's 12 Chicagos like in one. Like where do you go here? It's crazy.
Literally. Again, Jay, thank you so much for your time, everybody. Again, Jeremy, find him on social as well as the Revolution. It's called Revolution Sales Group on Facebook.
Sales Revolution on
Facebook. And we'll see you soon next time in person, my man.
All right, my man. Thanks. We'll come out in person. Be safe out there. Take care, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Great day.